Welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to be filming my March wrap-up for you guys. So unfortunately, I only read 4 books this month, and I think I went just a little too ambitious with my TBR because I only read 2 books on my TBR for last month. No, technically 4. I did read 4 books on my TBR, but I still had 4 other ones to go through, and I did not reach those 4. In fact, I brought 2 into this month's TBR. So, yeah. So, I'm going to talk about the books that I read either as an ebook or that I borrowed from my library, so I don't have a physical copy first, and then we will get into the 2 books that I have physically with me. So the first book that I finished in the month of March is Bind, Torture, Kill, and this book is literally about the BTK killer, all of his killings, and basically how he pulled them off. Now, I started this book in the month of March, and I finished it in the month of April. This book was a very, very difficult read. Not because it was bad or anything, but because you're literally reading how he murdered these poor people. And it's just, I don't really know how to explain it, but it was just very hard to keep reading because of that. And it just made it take a lot longer than it really needed to read. But going off of that, I will say that this book was very, very informative. It told you every little thing that may or may not have happened, and honestly, I would recommend reading this book to, like, if you have to do any sort of, like, report on the BTK killer, or if you just want to know more. Sometimes, like, those types of books, even though they're hard to read, it really gets you thinking, and it really gets you to, what's the word I'm looking for? It really gets your mind flowing on everything that has happened, what could have happened. If you don't know who the BTK killer is, he was a woman that tied women up, tortured them, and killed them, hence Bind, Torture, Kill. And most of the time, he did this for some sort of sexual pleasure, and he never raped the women, but it was for, like, his sexual fantasies, if that makes sense. So, it was very, very, very difficult to get through. And the BTK killer lasted for utmost of 30 years, and he had 10 murder victims, I want to say. And there was even a couple families in there too. So it's just, I can't imagine, because I know both of the families had surviving family members. So I can't even begin to imagine what those family members that survived went through. I really don't. It's just, I couldn't even begin to explain how I would feel if that had happened to a family member of mine. Now, next book I read was Animal Farm by George Orwell. In the month of February, I read 1984 by George Orwell, so I decided that in the month of March, I was gonna read, oh wait, no. In the month of March, I read 1984 by George Orwell. So in the month of April, don't mind me, shoot, I think in my TBR I said April TBR. April's almost over. Whoops. I will have to edit that. That's gonna be fun. Anywho, so in the month of April, I decided to read Animal Farm by George Orwell. And 1984 was leaps and bounds better than Animal Farm. Don't get me wrong, Animal Farm was still really good. The writing was really good, and he definitely got his point across. was basically trying to say how communism is never a good idea. Or not communism. Is it communism? What he was trying to say is how, like, working as a society isn't really a good idea because it's always going to go to somebody's head. And that's kind of where, and then that person that it goes to their head becomes a communist. So, socialist society to communist society, I think that's what it is. And in this aspect, the pigs were the ones kind of running everything because the pigs were, like, the smartest of all the animals that lived on the farm. And while I understand what he was trying to go for, I felt like the book was really, really rushed. I thought the beginning was great, but I feel like about midway to the end of the book, I just felt very rushed trying to read it. Like, something would happen, and then the next page, all that had changed and something else had happened. And then the next page, something else had changed and all this had happened. It just felt very, very rushed. Like, it felt like he was trying to get under a certain amount of pages and that he was just trying to rush the story. And that, I didn't really like that. That felt very, what's the word I'm looking for? That made me feel like he didn't really care about the story. And while I'm sure that is very untrue, I'm sure he cared about the story quite a bit. It was just one of those things where it was like, all that happened and I feel like I got nothing out of it. That's the best way I can describe it. So the next book I read was The Odyssey by Homer. This took me all of March and pretty much all of April to read. It is a very, very good story. This was a reread for me. I read it back in high school. But if you don't know, the Odyssey is written in Old English. So you really need, if you're not used to reading Old English, you really need to kind of focus in on it. You can't have any distractions or else you're going to be rereading the same spots over and over and over again, trying to figure out what happened. So the Odyssey is about Odysseus, who has been missing from his family for 20 years. He went to a battle against, what was it, Ilios? And he basically never returned home. So his wife Penelope is at home and she's sad, and his son Telemachus decides that he's going to go out and try to find out what happens to his father, which gets Penelope even sadder, and there's a bunch of men trying to win Penelope's heart, and it's just crazy. But, you know, Penelope's heart still belongs to Odysseus, and eventually he does make his return. I'm not going to tell you, like, the twist that happens in that, but just know he returns. And it's been like 20 somewhat years and nobody recognized him anymore. So it took him a hard minute to get Penelope to realize, hey, this is me. And I just thought the way that it was written and how he was able to get Penelope to realize that he was who he was, it was just a beautiful story. I would just highly, highly recommend this. I think this is a great classic to have in any book collection. I've been really trying to get as many classics as I can get my hands on for, like, super cheap. Like, I know the other day I got A Midsummer's Night Dream, which is my favorite piece by Shakespeare. And I also got Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. So I'm really excited. And the last book I read in the month of April, I actually finished this morning, was A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks. Nicholas Sparks is one of my favorite authors. I think I've mentioned that like 50,000 times at this point, but his books are always so good, and I was kind of getting into a little bit of a reading slump in the month of April, mostly because Bind, Torture, Kill was such a hard book to read, and then the Odyssey was such a long book, and it took me a long time to read it, and it was also a very difficult read due to the fact that it was written in Old English. You know, I haven't read Old English in years, since high school, and It's already been 6 years since I graduated from high school. Holy shoot, it's been 6 years. Anyway, so A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks is about this teenage boy and this teenage girl named Landon and Jamie. They are in their senior year of high school, and Landon is trying to get into UNC and is trying to get a bunch of extracurriculars out of his way, under his belt, for his college application. And so he becomes senior class president, and all of the, you know, senior class officers have to go to homecoming, so he ends up asking Jamie because they're in drama class together, and he knows nobody has asked her yet, and he's tried everybody else and nobody's saying yes, so he asks Jamie and says yes. Now, because Jamie did that favor for him, she asked him to play the lead in the play that her father, who is the pastor of their church, wrote a very, very long time ago. And he decides to do it and ends up falling in love with her. And she ends up, and he finds out later that she's actually very sick. She has leukemia, and you kind of read through their struggles from there. This was such a quick read, and it was so good to get me out of my reading slump that I had from Bind, Torture, Kill and from the Odyssey. So good. I would recommend Nicholas Sparks to anybody that has a reading slump. Oh, I don't think I gave my ratings. So Bind, Torture, Kill, I gave a 4.5 out of 5. The Odyssey, I gave a 5. A Walk to Remember, I gave a 5, and Animal Farm, I gave a 3.5. So yeah, that's it for my April wrap-up, and I'm pretty sure for my TBR video that I posted already that I said April TBR when I meant May TBR, so that's gonna be fun to edit. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!